Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, a place where you can come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker, and welcome to episode 62, How to Live a More Courageous Life. All right, so as you know, all month we're talking about rediscovering ourselves, figuring out where we are on the path, and then having the courage to live our own lives like we talked about in the last episode. So this week, I want to focus on one of my favorite topics and one that I have mentioned in previous episodes, but haven't really fleshed out too fully. And that is what is called the hero and the journey, or the hero's journey. And this is by one of my favorite people in the world, Joseph Campbell. He was the mythologist whose work is behind the whole concept of Star Wars, if that gives you any sense. And he has what's called the hero's journey, and there are 12 steps to it. And basically, any epic movie, any wonderful movie that we love has most of these steps in the story. And I think at the end of the day, it's because we all relate to that hero or heroine in the journey, trying to face themselves, face life, and get to Oz. Okay, so before we get there, I just want to reach out to all of you and say, hold on to the hope, hang in there. I know that the world is still in a very difficult place, but try to focus on the good. And today, try to focus on your own journey for a little bit. All right, the hero's journey, mythic structure of Joseph Campbell's monomyth, is an article written by Dan Bronzite. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Dan. And so I'm going to be accessing his article today to look at what the steps are that Joe Campbell came up with. And then I want you to think about where you are, how each step may or may not apply to you, and wherever you are is cool. If you're in a space where you can write some things down, I think that would be wonderful. But if not, if you're walking, if you're driving, if you're jogging, just absorb it, see what resonates, and know that whatever resonates is what is supposed to resonate. Remember? All right. So the monomyth, which means like the core myth behind every epic story, is called a universal story structure. So it's kind of like a story template that takes the main character through a sequence of stages. And like Dan says, and I believe, it is the process of personal transformation. And what I love here is he says, from an innocent child into a mature adult. Think about any epic story. That's usually what happens to the character, right? They grow up, maybe even on the outside too, as we look through their life. But more importantly, maturational growth is what you end up seeing in the movie. So he says that the child is born into a set of rules and beliefs in a group of people. And through the child's heroic efforts, he has to break free from these conventions, right? He has to transcend them and discover him or herself. And this is a sentence that I love. In the process, Dan says, the individual returns to his or her soul. So I think it is a process also where the blinders come off. Okay, so the first step in the hero's journey is what is called ordinary world. You know where the movie opens up, and it's where his present life is, or her present life. And you guys know when I say he, it's just to make it easier. By no means is this a male-focused journey. So the person in the movie, the hero, is oblivious at first to what Dan says, what adventures are to come. They're in their comfort zone. They're in their day-to-day. But this is where we learn the details, he says, about what his true nature is, you know, what capabilities are there, what his outlook is on life, what are the real circumstances. And Paul says this is what anchors him as a human. Like, in other words, we can start to relate to him because he's an everyday human. He's not a superhero. And then later in the story, we can also remember that and have more empathy and connection with him. So think about where you are today, like right now, you know, and You may not even realize it, or you may be very aware that maybe you're frustrated. Maybe you're bored. Maybe you're longing for a better life, and maybe you've been doing that for some time. Like Dorothy in the movie before the storm hit, before the big tornado came. She was lamenting. She didn't like where she lived. She felt stuck, right? So the ordinary world, like what is going on right now? The next step is what is called the call to adventure. And he says the hero's adventure begins when he receives a call to action. And this can be a bunch of different things. But he relates to the direct threat to his safety, maybe his family, his way of life, or to the peace of the community in which he lives, right? It may not be very dramatic, but it can be a phone call, it can be a conversation. It's whatever manifests, he said. But basically, the concept is it disrupts our daily comfort, our comfort zone, and presents a challenge or a quest that must be undertaken. And I think that this can be due to sometimes maybe a huge upheaval in your life, like death of a loved one, maybe dissatisfaction in your relationship, in your marriage, reaching a certain milestone or age, empty nesting, hitting 40, reaching a certain age, or a health scare. But it also could be change forced upon you, like change you didn't ask for. Like maybe your spouse leaves and you didn't know that was coming. Maybe you were laid off from your job. Maybe you were hit with a health condition or other circumstances that may shake up your world. Maybe you've been thinking, though, conversely, for years that you want it different. And maybe it's just like a lot of clients tell me, a lot of reasons, a lot of little reasons piling up. And for some crazy happenstance, the last one was the straw. And it doesn't make any sense why, but it just is. Okay. So this is where the awakening begins, and this call to action, call to adventure. You're sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? All right. But then guess what happens? Number 3, the refusal of the call. And I think we've all been here. We've all had our moments, right? I know I have. He says, although the hero may be eager to accept the quest, here comes the fear and the doubt, right? He says at this stage, he'll have fears that need overcoming. Second thoughts, deep personal doubts, are we up to the challenge? And a lot of times we might say, I can't do that. Or it's not the right time. Or that'd be too expensive. Or my spouse won't support me. So we will refuse the call. But then I love what he says here, and as a result may suffer somehow, right? Like something happens in the movie, those moments, like right after he refuses the call to action, something bad happens, someone close to him gets hurt, something in the epic story. Dan says the problem he faces may seem too much to handle, and the comfort of home far more attractive than the perilous road ahead. So we're weighing it out in our mind, like, I don't know if I want to do that. This would also be our own response, and once again helps us bond further with the reluctant hero. I'm like, wow, maybe you've been offered an opportunity for the call in the past. Or maybe as you look back on opportunities you didn't take, because maybe you were too afraid. Maybe it would have been too hard, too expensive, et cetera, et cetera. You felt pulled between maybe your family and that great opportunity. Maybe you took the easier road to where you stand now instead. And I want you to take a moment right now and think about maybe what regrets are coming up for you as you explore this. This is not to beat yourself up, but I do want you to think about the weight of not responding to the call. Like, where would your life be today? How might it be different? Looking back, now that you're older and wiser, what opportunities do you wish you would have taken? Now that you're on the other side and you kind of know more, and think of the cost. Okay. All right. So the next one, number 4, meeting the mentor. Joe Campbell says this is a crucial turning point where the hero desperately needs guidance and he meets a mentor figure who gives him something he needs. All right. He could be given an object of great importance, maybe a superpower, insight, the magic sword, right? Some wise advice, maybe even some practical training or self-confidence. Whatever the mentor provides, the hero with it serves to dispel the doubts and the fears, right, that the hero had when he was refusing the call, and give him the strength and the courage to begin his quest. And I would dare say to get back on the horse when he falls off. I love the quote, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. think about mentors that are in your life today, maybe, or were there before. I know for me, they were right there when I needed them, if I utilized them, right? Did I always heed their wonderful advice? Of course not. Looking back, do I wish I had? Hell yes. I had to learn and practice humility and the willingness to be taught, the willingness to admit what I was sitting in, screwing up, experiencing, aka coming to terms with reality, right? So mentors. And these don't have to be coaches that you pay or a pastor or a teacher. They could be your neighbor. They could be whoever feels moved to give you sage advice, encouragement, and wisdom, and challenge you in a loving way because they care. When we are embarking on something that's so huge, I think we need all the mentoring we can get and all the wisdom and support, especially people who have already either done the journey or they're a lot further along the journey that we are on, because they can give us some really good tips and things to look out for. Number 5, next step, crossing the threshold. So the hero, Dan says, is now ready to act upon his call to adventure and truly begin his quest, whether it be physical, spiritual, emotional. He may go willing or he may be pushed. I think like a sink or swim moment, like a big event happens. But either way, Dan says, he finally crosses the threshold between the world he is familiar with, his comfort zone, and the one which he is not. It might be leaving home for the first time. But he says when the threshold presents itself, this is where it's fish or cut bait, right? It's where our commitment, like, are we really committed? Are we ready to do this journey? Think about what might be a threshold for you in the future if you imagine taking a new exciting path. What comes up? Think about maybe some thresholds you've already crossed, and looking back, you feel so proud, and I know for me, so grateful I had the courage, right, at the moment to cross them. Wow. What did that courage bring to you that is good? And what are some precipices that you stood on and then turned around and went back? Again, not to beat yourself up, just to acknowledge. So after crossing the threshold, the next step, number 6, is called tests, allies, and enemies. And so now he says the hero is out of his comfort zone and he's confronted with an ever more difficult series of challenges that test him in a variety of ways, like obstacles that are thrown in his path, maybe physical hurdles, maybe people bent on thwarting his progress, right? The hero must overcome each challenge he is presented with on the journey towards his ultimate goal. And he says the hero needs to find out who can be trusted and who can't, right? This is where you earn your allies and you meet your enemies. And the allies help the hero prepare for greater ordeals yet to come. This is a stage where the hero's skills and powers are tested, and every obstacle he faces gives us a deeper insight into his character and ultimately identify with him even more. I'm like, boy, isn't this the place where you find out who your friends are? Really. It's where I think we find out who we can really have in our circle to support us. And guys, why I keep preaching about the importance of healthy support. Because here is where you're going to be really tested on how committed you are, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, how much courage do you really have to keep pushing forward. I call it the trenches. And we're here, I think, for a while, I think. And the people in our life who support us and encourage us and want the best, we're going to have to lean hard, especially when we're dealing with the people who are hell-bent in getting in our way. They're jealous, they're controlling, they're toxic, they're scared, right? You're going to need an army of support is what I tell my clients to go up against this stuff. I mean, then there's just the regular obstacles where life shows up and life happens. Like COVID's a good example of that. Next step, number 7, the approach to the inmost cave. And that's Joe Campbell's quote, one of my favorites. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. I think it kind of encapsulates this whole thing. Dan says the inmost cave may represent many things in the hero's story, such as an actual location in which lies a terrible danger, or, and I think this is really important, an internal conflict. which maybe up until now you haven't had to face or haven't had to really, really deal with. He says, as the hero approaches the cave, he must make final preparations before taking that final leap into the great unknown. And at the threshold to the cave, he may once again face some of the doubts and fears that first surfaced upon his call to adventure. He may need some time to reflect upon his journey. And he says, in the story, the audience understands the magnitude of the ordeal here that awaits the hero and escalates the tension in anticipation of this ultimate test. I think for us, it may be the biggest fears that we have, like Indiana Jones and the snakes is what comes up for me. It might be you're afraid of speaking publicly. It might be setting big boundaries in difficult relationships. It might be ending a relationship. It might be for you changing careers, starting a new one, going back to school. All of those things that you're probably terrified to do because the deep cave represents, I think, the thing we've got to work on, got to get rid of, got to demolish, got to change, got to heal. And a lot of times those are our avoidance behaviors, immature behaviors, right? Like, let's say you really want that promotion, but got some procrastination going on or some emotional immaturity. And it's like, boss isn't going to give you that, right? And so the cave that we fear to enter has the most difficult thing perhaps within ourselves that we have to work on in order to have what we ultimately deserve and need, in order to be our highest self and be our best self. We have to be brave enough to decide that something else is more important than our damn fear. That life is short and we just really, really want what is on the other side. All right. So number 8, the ordeal, the supreme ordeal it's called. And it says maybe a dangerous physical test or a deep inner crisis that the hero must face in order to survive or for the world in which the hero lives to continue to exist, right? Save the world. The hero has to draw upon, he says, his skills and his experiences gathered upon the path to the inmost cave in order to overcome the most difficult challenge. So all the steps along the way on our journey prepares us for the next big ordeal. Every step matters. And he says only through some form of death, quote unquote, can the hero be reborn, experiencing a metaphorical resurrection that somehow grants him greater power or insight necessary in order to fulfill his destiny or reach the journey's end. I look at this step as kind of the point of no return, the game changer experience, right? Like taking the biggest risk ever, making it real, signing the document, getting that moving van in the actual driveway, walking away or walking into something scary, cutting the final ties, here's a big one, that were our safety nets that we needed to have in case, quote unquote. It's sink or swim time. This is it. We either do it or we don't, and there's no turning back once we do it. We are changed. Number 9, the reward, seizing of the sword. Joe Campbell says, after defeating the enemy, surviving death, or finally overcoming his greatest personal challenge, the hero is ultimately transformed into a new state, emerging from battle as a stronger person and often with a prize of some sort. I think for us, it may be walking across the stage with that degree, landing that new position, buying that home, finally feeling some inner peace around your trauma and your childhood, reaching your desired weight, a degree of health, finishing the marathon, publishing the book, moving across country or somewhere else in the world. So the reward, what you think is the reward, but also there are unexpected rewards when we get here. And I think that we don't know until we get here what they might be. They could be a deeper sense of meaning. They could be feeling like you accomplished something. And remember, the hero's journey is between the hero and the hero. It's really not the hero and anyone else at the end of the day. Number 10, the road back. Joe Campbell says this stage in the hero's journey represents a reverse echo of the call to adventure. It's interesting. In which the hero had to cross the first threshold. Because now he has to return home with his reward, but this time the anticipation of danger is replaced with that of acclaim and perhaps vindication, absolution, or even exoneration. But, he says, the journey's not yet over. He may still need one last push back into the ordinary world. The moment before the hero finally commits to the last stage of his journey may be a moment in which he must choose between his own personal objective and that of a higher cause. I think this is also where we can get tempted once again on the path to just quit, to turn back, forget all this hard work and sweat. It's when we go back to that unhealthy person or situation like one more time. You know what I'm talking about? I think it's perhaps because we need to check ourselves to see if we're really, really, truly done, ready for better, not wanting to return to less than we need and deserve, rectifying that no, it's not selfish to be successful and take care of yourself and get out of toxic relationships. All right, so the road back. The next one, number 11, is called Resurrection. They say this is the climax in which the hero must have his final and most dangerous encounter with death. The final battle also represents something far greater than the hero's own experience, usually saving the world, the greater good, all that stuff, with its outcome having far-reaching consequences to his ordinary world and the lives of those he left behind. And that's interesting because, again, this is never usually a selfish experience, because when we get there, we actually end up helping others far more than we could ever see when we started out. So it's a good thing. It's mutually beneficial for us and for everyone around us. If he fails, he says, others will suffer, and this not only places more weight upon his shoulders, but in a movie, grips the audience so they too feel that part of the conflict and share the hero's hopes, fears, and trepidation. Ultimately, the hero will succeed, destroy the enemy, and emerge from battle cleansed and reborn. I think this is where you don't give in to that manipulative person or people in your life who are going to make it really hard, perhaps, for you to move forward. You know the part of the movie where it's the ultimate test, the last lap of the race, and then something happens to almost mess it up. So the final stage is number 12, the return with the elixir. He says the final stage of the hero's journey, which he returns home to his ordinary world, a changed person. He will have grown as a person, learned many things, faced many terrible dangers, even death, but now looks forward to the start of a new life. His return may even bring fresh hope to those left behind, a direct solution to their problems, or perhaps a new perspective for everyone to consider. And so the final reward, he says, may be literal or metaphoric. But he says the big thing is it represents three things: change, success, and proof of his journey. And then the doubters that will be ostracized, his enemies punished, and his allies rewarded. You know how that always happens at the end of the movie. So he says clearly things will never be the same again. In an interview with Bill Moyers, Joe Campbell said, "It's a fundamental experience that everyone has to undergo. We are in our childhood for at least 14 years, dependent upon others psychologically, materially, and physically. But slowly we trade dependency for psychological self-responsibility." I love that. He says, eventually, when we've successfully faced challenges, we are enriched and have wisdom to offer others. This process requires a metaphorical death and resurrection, Campbell said. And that is the basic motif of the hero journey: leaving one condition, finding the source of life to bring you forth in a richer or more mature or other condition. Wow. So those are the 12 steps or the 12 stages of the hero's journey. And my hope was that you got a sense of what each stage is about, and you can recall some of your favorite epic movies and kind of how this applies. It's going to be hard to watch another epic movie and not think about it, I will tell you that. What I'd like for you to take away from this episode today are a few things. And one of them, I want you to look at where you are today, like really. Have you already started your adventure maybe? Maybe you're midway through. Maybe you just started out a week ago. Did you have adventures in the past where you started and then detoured? Has COVID, maybe, to bring it to the present, created a detour for you in very profound ways, very real ways, and you might be feeling a little depressed or disheartened or discouraged? Where are you today? Maybe you haven't started out on your journey, and maybe you're getting ready to, or maybe you're scared. Think about what that journey would be, though. What would you love to get to on the other side? Conversely, what are some upheavals that might be happening for you today that you may be very upset about, very grief-stricken about, very frustrated with, resisting the change, which is normal. Change is loss, change is unknown. And if you have control issues, that's going to be harder to embrace. The second thing is journal your feelings about the journey. I think that's really important. Either the one you're in the thick of right now, ones that you started out and just walked away from midstream because you got scared, life got hard. Maybe the one you need to begin. What feelings are coming up around that? And number 3, know that your journey, if it has not begun, will begin when you are ready and not a moment before, like you've heard me say. Take the time now to be where you are. Do the things that are on your radar now, because each step is preparing us for the next one. I've walked alongside way too many people over the years to not see the importance and the meaning around each step of Joe Campbell's hero's journey. I think they're all there for a reason. I think we need helpers along the way. We have to defeat the bad guys, and those are people in our life who maybe traumatized us, who aren't supporting us now, who are trying to make things difficult out of their own insecurity. Maybe it's just ourselves. Maybe all of your journey is going to be facing yourself. Maybe you are lucky and blessed to have wonderful, encouraging, loving, supportive people around you. I'm a big environments person. I think when there's a lot of healthy around us, we are more prone to thrive. I want you to think about the people in your life who maybe wouldn't support or wouldn't be able to support a journey, an adventure for you. Maybe they're not ready to be on an adventure. Maybe you would have to leave some folks behind for a while, and that's scary. Think about what would your adventure be and why. And what would be fabulous if you were able to complete it. What would that be like? Why would that be wonderful? My guess is it would have something to do with a greater meaning and purpose for you, something you're passionate about, something you're gifted at, but maybe are afraid to step out there, something that might set you free financially, perhaps, give you more freedom, like leaving one's 9-to-5 job, becoming an entrepreneur comes to mind. Doing a 180 from your life today, very interesting, right? Because that begs the question, like, why am I living how I'm living today if it doesn't feel congruent with who I really am? And I want to remind you, maybe you just were so out of touch with who you really were. Hopefully by listening to all these episodes this past year, you've gotten more in touch with who you are, your authentic self. That's where the joy is. All right. So that's the hero's journey. My hope is that it will be helpful for you to kind of normalize your own adventure, know what to look for, know what to look out for, and know what to gather along the way. So next week, I'm really excited to have my friend and colleague, Sonia Thompson-Halsey, because she's going to be here to talk to us about life upheavals, how to walk through them and thrive. All right. So remember, all month I've been telling you this is a discovery process. And please continue to make it a gentle and loving one. This is not the time to shame or blame anyone, including yourself. Just take this journey in. Just absorb it, embrace it. Appreciate where you are today. Appreciate how profound transformation can be. Allow the healing, do the work, and I say, let the adventure begin. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today. Again, may you stay healthy, grounded. Hold on to hope, guys. Don't give up. Focus on the good stuff in yourself and make it your adventure this week to find the good wherever you go. Be sure to check the show notes at www.ownitpowercast.com. Sign up for the newsletter if you don't already get it. It comes out each Tuesday, and it has the bonus downloads for each episode when they're included. All right, so until next time, pay it forward, keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you could begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.